Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Arnel De Leon, wishing you having a great day today. I hope you, your friends, your family, you're all safe, you're all healthy during a time of major uncertainty, whether you live in the States or internationally. Things are very unclear right now, currently in the States. Texas and Florida are holding back on the reopening. They were supposed to do a cold reopen, and then guess what? Huge cases of coronavirus are increasing. More people are getting it, which is very, very bad. So right now, reopening for both Florida and Texas, they got held back. And considering the fact that I live in California, we are kind of doing a slight reopening right now. Like, there are some restaurants that are operating kind of normally. You got some stores that you got people going to Walmarts and Targets. There are some people eating at your local diners. So things do feel kind of the same, but at the same time, not really. So social distancing is still happening here at the States, and hopefully things can go and get back to normal in the next coming months, because gosh darn it, it's really painful staying at home. It really is. And what I'm sad about is that there might be chances that stores might put upon more limits again. Because right now things seem kind of normal, with like stores being active, restaurants being active. But if things are going currently how it is right now in the States, then we might see, some stores reclosing again. So, things are getting kind of complicated here. But one thing that definitely wasn't complicated was the fact that Dustin Porier versus Dan Hooker was definitely one of the best fights of the entire year. I'll be talking about the recent UFC Fight Night event that happened at the UFC Apex facility, where we had Dustin Porier against Dan Hooker. Coming up, though, is Fight Island. And I'm super excited about that. We got a lot of good fights coming up at Fight Island. Though, because here's the thing, Dana White wasn't even in the show today. He really wasn't. He usually comes by in every UFC Apex facility show. Like, he's always in the background, like, reading papers or watching the fights. But in this night, he wasn't here. He's already at Fight Island, relaxing there, trying to organize some stuff. But I'll be talking about a couple fights here that really opened my eye. That really was the most interesting fights. I'll tell you that. So yeah, Dustin Porier versus Dan Hooker, one of the best fights of the entire night. One of the best fights of the entire year, honestly. Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall. This was an interesting fight because Mike Perry was a character. He really was a strange character. And Mickey Gall also had a really good showing, my personal opinion here. Takashi Sato had a really good performance against Jason Wiltz. And a fight here that I'm very disappointed about that didn't happen. Aspen Ladd versus Sarah McMahon. That fight was supposed to happen. That fight has some heavy implications for especially Aspen Ladd, who only has one loss as she's trying to buy her way in for a title fight. But another fight that really was interesting for me here was Kay Hansen against Jin Yu Frey. In that we got a current, not a former current, but we have an Invicta champion in Jin Yu Frey coming from the Atomweight division as the Atomweight champion, fighting against a young 20-year-old Kay Hansen, and these two fighters literally just signed for the UFC this past week. So they had 7 days to prep up for this fight, and then they still competed, and I'm just like, wow, this is really astounding. You guys were able... But then again, like, every fighter here got less than a month's prep time in order to fight each other. It was strange. So let's go talk about the main event here, which was Dan Hooker versus Dustin Porier. The betting odds were really high. They were really high on Dustin Porier kind of smoking Dan Hooker here, which really astounded me. Because I knew this fight would be incredible, because I think it was like Dustin Porier was minus 300. Like, he was the overwhelming favorite against Dan Hooker. which astounded me because when I look at these two are very close in terms of skill level here. There are two differentiating aspects or characteristics about these fighters here. That Dan Hooker has a significant reach advantage and is much more bigger than Dustin Poirier, but Dustin Poirier has the experience at fighting in big fights. I think he's competed in like 16 UFC main events, which is astounding as all heck. And so Poirier versus Dan Hooker. So when the fight first started here, Dan Hooker was pretty much utilizing his range, and he was poking out Dustin Poirier, while Dustin Poirier was leaning in with some really hard shots. But there was a shot chart that showed up at the end of the fight, where it showed like the total accumulation of strikes and what happened, like what the fight statistics are. And when you look at in the grand scheme of things, I'll tell you what now the totals here. So Dan Hooker landed 182 strikes out of 283. He hit his shots 64% of the time. Dustin Poirier, he landed 72% of his shots, 208 out of 289. These two fighters nearly had the exact same number of attempted strikes. It just Dustin Poirier was a lot more accurate in his strikes. And then we look at significant strike percentage here. Wow, it's also astounding. These two pretty much had the exact same number of significant strikes, with Dan Hooker coming in at 155 significant strikes compared to Dustin Poirier's 153 significant strikes. And here's the interesting part. So, in terms of takedowns, Dan Hooker got 4 out of his 9 takedown attempts, while Dustin Poirier got 1 out of 7. While Dustin Poirier was able to get multiple submission attempts, 4, while Hooker got 0, those submission attempts came from Poirier coming from the ground. So Hooker would go and take down Poirier, and then from then on, Poirier would go for a triangle, or go for an armbar, or he'd go for a Kimura. Even though Dan Hooker got the takedowns, it felt like Dustin Poirier did a really good job defending himself. So here's the tail of the tape here. So first round and second round, without a doubt, Dan Hooker won the fight. Most of the shots that landed came from the first and second round. Like significantly, he had twice as many shots landed than Poirier in the first and second round. But Poirier gave enough really good shots onto Dan Hooker that there was no way the judges could score a 10-8, which I agree with. It should be 10-9, 10-9. So it was 10-9, 10-9 with Hooker landing some takedowns, landing some significant strikes, landing a large volume of strikes. And then it came to the third round. Third round could have been a complete toss-up, in my opinion. Third round could have gone either Hooker, it could have gone Poirier, but based on the fight stats and the fact that Dan Hooker came to the third round a lot more tired and he was breathing a lot more than Dustin Poirier, there was a significant difference of momentum and acceleration in his fighting compared to Poirier, which gave the judges enough of a reasoning for Poirier to go and win the third round. Because in the third round, second round, Dan Hooker was laying everything on Poirier. Third round, he was laying some shots onto Poirier, but the sheer amount of volume was such a significant drop off that it was hard to give Hooker the points here, while Dustin Poirier was a lot more consistent, a lot more clean in his striking. And then fourth and fifth round, it pretty much became all Poirier, because at that point Dan Hooker's volume of strikes just started to peter down, and then things switched up. It felt Dan Hooker without a doubt won the striking exchanges in the first and second round. Then the fourth and fifth round, without a doubt, Poirier won the striking exchange there, because while Poirier wasn't that active in the first and second, Dan Hooker wasn't as active in the fourth and fifth round. So the one deciding round here was the third round, and Dan Hooker pretty much tired himself out by the third round that there was no way the judges could go and give him a point there. So if you look at the fight accumulatively on who won based on a cumulative total of strikes, and who would have won the fight if there was one more extra round. That's what I would be saying. Now, there were several moments in the first and second round that one could argue, dang man, I think it was in the end of the second round, I think it was to the end of both first and second round, where Dan Hooker was able to drop Dustin Poirier, and there was a brief period of time where Dustin Poirier was on the complete defensive, and Hooker was sliding all these hard shots onto Poirier, but the clock went off, the time went off, and it prevented Dan Hooker from laying more shots onto Poirier. If the first and second round instead of being 5 minutes, became 10 minutes, and the fight were to continue on with no bell stopping the fight, stopping the, pushing for a third round, then I genuinely believe that Dan Hooker would have, knocked out Dustin Poirier. Without a doubt about it. But Dustin Poirier having a real iron jaw, being the proper warrior he is, he kept a consistent pace, being the veteran, coming in, fighting, unlike Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier is more experienced fighting in championship rounds. And so Poirier was able to outlast Hooker, and now, Dustin Poirier, I don't know what's next for him in the rankings here. I really don't. Dan Hooker, because of his performance, he doesn't really drop. I think he just stays in place. Looking at the lightweight rankings right now, we have Gaethje, who's interim champion, Tony Ferguson. We don't know when Tony's coming back. Dustin Poirier is the number 3 ranked fighter. And I just don't see Dustin Poirier fighting against Tony Ferguson. I just really don't. That's a nice fight to watch, without a doubt about it. But at this point right now, one could argue, you can argue from the camp of Tony Ferguson that he should fight Gaethje. He should fight Gaethje again because he didn't have enough prep time to fight against Gaethje. And he should fight against Khabib just because those two have been avoiding fighting each other for years, that I think at this point people want to see it. People really want to see Ferguson-Khabib finally happen. And then there's Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is ranked number 4, and I am astounded by that, considering the fact that he hasn't fought in a while now. I think he's only fought once in the lightweight division in the past, 2.5 years. So he's still ranked incredibly high. His win against Donald Cerrone, he had one win against Donald Cerrone, and that bumped him up into being number 4. That's very, very strange. But now, what's next for Dustin Poirier? I'm not sure. I think Poirier vs. Conor McGregor makes the most sense right now for him in his career. In the sense that Tony Ferguson seems it's best for Tony Ferguson to be matched up against Gaethje or Khabib. And since Dustin Poirier ain't moving anytime soon, he's not gonna be fighting Khabib, Gaethje, or Ferguson anytime soon. So the next best bet would be against Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor, in the perception of Conor, he could see his fight against Dustin Poirier kind of as a tune-up fight. And also, this could be a rematch, because Conor McGregor has already defeated Dustin Poirier before in the past. But this is Dustin Poirier when he wasn't as good. Now we're seeing a better version of Dustin Poirier. So you could sell off the fight. You can sell on a Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier 2, which Poirier has to fight. He has his redeem match against Conor. And then for Dan Hooker had a really good performance. I don't think it's right for him to move anywhere. So 3 fighters here that are trying to buy their way into the top 4 of the rankings right now are Dan Hooker, Paul Felder, Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira, in my personal opinion, has to be the most underrated fighter in all of the UFC. I genuinely believe Charles Oliveira has all the skills and has all the tools to defeat anyone in the top 4 rankings. I really do. For Dan Hooker and Paul Felder, I can see their ceiling. I see Dan Hooker and Felder, at their very best, they're pretty much in the rankings of Dustin Poirier. But I don't think they're in the same league as a Gaethje or as a Ferguson or as Khabib, and the marketability is not high enough. Is not that high enough to fight against someone of the Conor. So right now, I look at Charles Oliveira being this guy who has a whole lot of potential. I'm saying he has a lot of potential, but he pretty much is having a second win in his career. The guy's a proper journeyman here. So I say right now, if I was booking this, I would book Oliveira versus Felder, Oliveira versus Hooker, and I don't see Conor McGregor fighting against Oliveira. And Poirier, he says he's kind of growing tired about the sports, so Poirier will not be available. So I think Oliveira versus Felder, winner of that fights Hooker, winner of that fights against Ferguson, and then you can bleed onto either Khabib or Justin Gaethje. That's how I would book it. I think that makes the very most sense here. I'm saying that Kevin Lee is ranked number 8, which is so strange to me because Kevin Lee, UFC needs to stop doing this, where you have inactive fighters who are still in the rankings. I just don't get that. If you are not active, then you shouldn't be in the rankings. That's my personal viewpoint here, because Kevin Lee himself has said, you know what, I don't feel like fighting. He says he wants to go take a couple years off, because Oliveira versus Kevin Lee, their fight was incredibly good. Was one of more. I think I'm not sure if it was the fight of the night of that night, but Oliveira Skively was an incredibly good fight, and Oliveira shows like I think he has enough skill. He has enough to go defeat somebody of Felder and Hooker. It's just whether or not he's going to have the opportunity to do so. And also, he lives in Brazil, so we're unsure what his status is in terms of international flights. Fight Island is still there, but we don't know how international travel will affect fighters who want to go to Fight Island. We're still unsure about that. So right now, the lightweight division right now, it's pretty much stuck until we know what happens between Gaethje and Khabib. And then from then on, now we can actually look at the landscape of the lightweight division and judge what's going to happen next. And so you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the short break here. See you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So I just talked about Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker, one of the best fights of the entire year. I recommend anybody to go watch this fight. Now let's move towards Mike Perry against Mickey Gall. This is certainly okay. So there's more story. More people talk about Mike Perry, the person, than they do about the actual fight. So let's talk about the fight first. All right then, Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall. Mike Perry just didn't respect Mickey Gall's power. He just really didn't. When looking at this fight. So, this fight was supposed to be striker versus wrestler. But it just turned out to be Mike Perry pretty much dominating Mickey Gall in both the wrestling and the striking. Now, I'm not going to disrespect Mickey Gall here. Mickey Gall had a really good showing here. He was doing all the right moves. He was doing all the right things. So, Mickey Gall right now, he's in that same boat as Alexander Hernandez. In that the way you're fighting is right. You're not doing anything wrong based on the eye test. Like, you know how to wrestle, you know how to strike, you have the right form. You're doing a really good job for yourself, actually. But it's just that when you're... Okay, so in Hernandez's last fight, Hernandez would land these, really clean shots that his opponent would eat. The form of his punches look good. They don't have enough power to it that his opponent should respect it. And so they can go eat it. So this also reminds me of the Hannah Cyphers versus Mackenzie Dern. Hannah Cyphers Mackenzie and Hannah Cyphers against Maria Gapova. In the fact that Hannah Cyphers did the right thing in terms of she clinched up with her opponent and had several clean shots. That if it were Francis Ngannou who were doing those exact same shots, that person would probably die. But, unlike Ngannou, and I'm not saying every fighter should be like Ngannou, but I'm saying, every striker should have a power game that's very threatening, that seems like that if they were to connect a handful of shots to you, you would go down. But Mickey Gall, though, he's like, okay, well, I'm hitting all these good shots, but they don't have any power to them. So Mike Perry's going to eat them, and he's going to walk up to you, and he's going to apply the pressure. And that's pretty much what happened. Mickey Gall, utilizing his reach, was constantly jabbing on Mike Perry. But Mike Perry's like, you know what? I don't respect your game. I'm just going to go forward because the stats say Mickey Gall fought better than Mike Perry. That's what the stats say. Because Mickey Gall, in the first and second round, statistically landed more shots than Mike Perry. But if you just watch the actual fight, you recognize that those strikes just didn't matter. They don't matter. It barely phased Mike Perry. Mickey Gall can hit Mike Perry with 5 strikes to the face, and Mike Perry would still go push forward, while Mike Perry could lean on and hit, 1 or 2 strikes to the face, and Mickey Gall would already be like dazed and confused. Because Gall's striking game, although it can work on a person like CM Punk, but it can't work on, Mike Perry here. So Mike Perry, he ate all of Mickey Gall's strikes here, and he was doing much more damage significantly, to the point that by the 3rd round, Mike Perry applied so much pressure onto Mickey Gall that Mickey Gall's arms started to go a little bit down, and he just stopped defending himself. He was trying, he really was. Mickey Gall has really good striking accuracy. It just, the power doesn't come along with the accuracy. So it led to Perry just pressuring on Gall, making Gall as uncomfortable as possible, and then, landing these, really hard shots onto Gall. I think it was in the 3rd round, to which, it was, in the 2nd round, to which Mike Perry landed a really good, right hook onto Gall. Gall fell forward, and he had to roll his way out of it, then get on his back. And for the most part here, Mike Perry dominated Mickey Gall on the ground with his own wrestling for about 5 minutes. So this really was the experience of Mike Perry pretty much helped him out in this fight here. The experience and the power of Mike Perry dominated Mickey Gall. So it was a great showing by Mickey Gall. He tried his best, but as of right now, Mickey Gall needs a lot to work with. I don't know, maybe move up a division? I think that would work well for him. I think if you were to gain a little bit more weight, try to acquire a little bit more power in his strikes. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Maybe if he gains a little bit more weight, lift the weights more. Try to gain some power because unless Mickey Gall does something on how to get some striking power back to him, or how to have, he needs to develop a striking game that's good enough for him to apply pressure on his opponent and go for a takedown. Because by the time Mike Perry, I think he's top 10 in takedown defense for welterweights. Mike Perry's pretty experienced handling with wrestlers. And so for Mickey Gall, if he were to develop a better striking game, he would be able to go strike Mike Perry, and then Mike Perry would be so afraid of Mickey Gall striking that Gall can go and shoot in for a double leg takedown or a single leg. Unless Mickey Gall develops that skill set, I don't think he's going to go anywhere in the welterweight division, and he should consider moving up one division. That's what I'm thinking right now. And so now we're talking about the fighting game here. Mike Perry had a really good fight game here. Let's talk about Mike Perry himself now, because the story behind this, so there are 2 stories that are going on about UFC Fight Night here. The story was, what's next for Dustin Porier or Dan Hooker if they're to win their main event fights? That's the first story. Second story, what's up with Mike Perry bringing his girlfriend and not his training team with him? Because Mike Perry had no cornermen. He had somebody, fixing his face, or preventing blood, or preventing his face being swollen up. He had a doctor crew there, but he had no actual coaching. He had his own training camp, and he brought his girlfriend there, and it was super awkward because in between rounds, the cameraman would go towards the fighter and their cornerman, and we would hear Mickey Gall's corner being like, "Okay, yeah, you're doing a good job there. Don't forget to lead in for some leg strikes there. You take your jabs. Try to do a combo after every time he counters. All right, then go for a single leg takedown when you can. Once he goes for a left hook, all right, then. All right, got it, Mickey Gall. Got it. So that's Mickey Gall's cornerman. Here's Mike Perry's corner. Mike Perry making his way to the corner. Then you hear his girlfriend. "You're doing a good job, babe. You're doing a good job." Drink some water. It was super awkward. It was the most awkward corner I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. It really is. So a lot of flack was going towards Mike Perry. I know Daniel Cormier and Bisping were talking flack about Mike Perry, saying that, "Oh man, dude, this guy's in love." Because Mike Perry, if you guys didn't know, he just had a divorce, I think. I think he just had a divorce, or he broke up with his recent girlfriend, and now he has his brand new girlfriend, and he's really proud of her. You can tell, a guy's really proud of her proud of their girlfriend or proud of their partner, when they start posting a bunch of pictures of them together, constantly, to the point where it's kind of, nauseating. I kind of did at one point, so I can relate to Mike Perry. Plus also, like, when you're really in love with a person, you're just actively, like, bragging about it to an extent. It's so strange. It really is how love works. But Mike Perry, he has his new girlfriend. He's very braggy about it. He's very proud of it, to the point that he's already bringing her to his MMA fights as her exclusive only cornerman. It is strange. It just really is. And what makes it really strange is the fact that I don't remember any fighter ever in UFC or in boxing or mixed martial arts that came into a fight without cornermen. And Mike Perry, I understand where Mike Perry is coming from. I really do. Because there are some cornermen that gave really bad advice or have nothing to say. I remember, and when Eddie Bravo was a cornerman for Tony Ferguson, like, all Eddie Bravo said, it was a 5-round fight. The only thing Eddie Bravo said was go for an Ominari roll. Go for an Ominari roll, alright? Yeah. That's the only thing he said. And I've seen it countless times where the cornermen are talking to their fighter and they just say nothing. They don't. They're like, okay, you're doing a good job there, don't give up, make sure you go for a hook. And then, like, they're just giving this advice that don't actually, like, mean anything. They really don't. A lot of advice I've seen comes down to, hey man, you're doing a good job, don't give up. Alright then, don't go, you gotta be a little bit more aggressive this time. Go for the knockout. Like, go for the knockout? You're not the one who's actually fighting in the octagon there. You're not fighting in the actual cage. I hate cornermen that give advice where they expect you to do stuff. This happens in the Ultimate Fighter a lot. In the Ultimate Fighter, if you want to see, like, that definition of bad coaching, of people who just don't give, like, any positively good advice at all, it would be the Ultimate Fighter. In every single season of the Ultimate Fighter, whenever it's a wrestler versus striker game, the wrestler takes on the striker, and then whoever is the coach of that season, whether it be like Forrest Griffin, or Conor McGregor, or Chuck Liddell, or Rampage Jackson, Chael Sonnen, whoever the coach is, they'll all say the exact same thing. And I've heard this in actual fights. Just get up, man! Come on, just get up! What, do you not want this? Do you not want this? Just get up! If it was that easy to get out from the ground, if somebody is mounting you, and you're laying these hard shots, and you're just hearing some person in the background saying, come on, just get up, man. What's wrong with you? Just get up. Get up. Do you want this? Oh man, dude, this guy's a quitter. Don't give up, man. Just get up. It's so ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as that one time when Uriah Faber and his, like, Team Alpha, apparently this Team Alpha member is Team Conor McGregor. So, Team Alpha Male were the coaches of an Ultimate Fighter, and all he said was, you gotta fight the hands, fight the hands, fight the hands, fight the hands, yep, you're fighting the hands. No, now you're not fighting the hands. Fight the hands! And then from Conor's side, Conor would say, you're doing a good job! Beautiful! Beautiful! Get up! Get up! Beautiful! There are coaches that don't say anything meaningful, that don't say anything interesting. Now, I hear good coaching. I do. I've heard it before. It happens. But in a lot of cases, we see cornermen there that don't actually give really any advice, but are just there for motivational supports. And then Mike Perry says, okay, I'm sick and tired of these cornermen that are not telling me anything interesting when I get to the corner. And you can see it all the time. Then, like, I agree with Mike Perry. I do. I don't mind. He should get a cornerman crew, though, because once you do get a good cornerman crew that know what they're talking about, and that you can believe and you can trust in, that will give you actual good advice, it pays dividends. It really does. It can make or break a fighter in becoming a champion. It really can. Like champions have really great cornermen. Like Kamaru Usman has a great corner crew. TJ Dillashaw, when he was champion, had a really good corner crew. Cody Garbrandt's Justin Gaethje has a really good corner crew. Cody Garbrandt's current team right now, that's not comprised of just, Team Alpha Male, is really good. So having a good corner can pay dividends for you in your career. Mike Perry now, being the journeyman that he is, he's thinking, okay, I need to change something up right now, and my corner crew isn't doing anything right now, so I'm going to change things up. I'm just gonna have my girlfriend there, and I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna find my own corner crew. So, whatever Mike Perry thinks will be beneficial for him in his career, you know, that's all on him. Whether it helps or not, that's all on him. That's his decision. He's a grown up. Who am I to judge him? Who am I? In the post-fight press conference, people were talking about him also, because he then went on to this rant that kind of made sense, but still was really ultra ranty. And that I think whoever was talking, he was talking about, hey man, I'm not going to be all these fighters here who are going to go and ask for more money. What I'm saying is that the government shouldn't go be taking their money. Shouldn't be taking my money because I'm a fighter and they're not tax deductible, and I need and I got to pay taxes for being a fighter, and we got to stop the government from taking my money. All right, y'all. I know people were doubting me. You were judging me. I think everyone was judging me. No, not everyone, but mostly people like you, but I'm not saying you, but almost a lot of people, everybody was saying that I was going to win. Actually, no, people thought I was going to win. It was the most mind-melting interview I've ever, heard. And I'm surprised nobody told him to shut up. I'm surprised nobody looked at him and told him just give short answers. I'm sick and tired of these fighters who go do these interviews and they come across as the most dumbest people in the world. Not really dumb, but come across as the most incoherent people out there. Just say this is a great fight. Mickey Gall had a good showing. There were a lot of people out there who were critiquing me, but I won. That's what matters most. I made my money. Now I'm going to go pay off a lot of things, and I'm humble and I'm proud of what happened here. Don't rant about the government. Don't rant about tax deductibles. Don't rant about haters that are not haters. It gets ridiculous. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back right after the short break here with some more MMA news.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So I am discussing UFC Fight Night, Dan Hooker resisting Porier. And let's talk about one fight that really stood out to me was Takashi Soto against Jason Witt. So it is coming in from South China Morning Post, in which I go into detail even more about this fight. With the headline being, UFC Takashi Soto shrugs off coronavirus drama with 48-second TKO of late replacement Jason Witt. Japanese prospect Takashi Soto made the most of being bumped up to the main card after securing a stunning 40-second TKO at UFC Vegas 4 on Saturday against Jason Witt. The 30-year-old Soto, who is 16-3, whose original opponent, Ramiz Barimaj, was removed from the card due to his cornerman testing positive for COVID-19 during fight week, landed a heavy right hand to drop late replacement Jason Witt in the first round. Soto then waited patiently for the right moment to finish the 30-year-old American with a series of hammer punches. I feel good, so I had great training with the best coaches and teammates at Sanford MMA every day. I'm happy to win, said the Tokyo-born Soto, who trains alongside elite UFC fighters including Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. Actually, I was looking for a KO win and was able to keep my distance and do something from my fight camp, so I'm glad I could use it for the great result today. He said adding the late replacement drama was no problem. Sato is now back in the win column, having lost to Belal Muhammad via third round rear naked choke on September 2019. Belal Muhammad, the guy's a fighter. He's a warrior also. So don't be down that he lost against somebody as tough and as good as Muhammad. He is 2-1 in the UFC since signing last year. It was Sato's first fight since the death of his father in February. He missed the funeral to prepare for a fight in Auckland, New Zealand on UFC Fight Night. Felder vs. Hooker card, but the fight fell through. What's interesting of note was that he was the only fighter to win via KO in the main card here. So let's look at the card in its entirety. So we have Julian Vellante. We got Maurice Green defeating against Julian Vellante in the third round by submission. We got Brendan Allen winning by decision. Takashi Soda winning by KO/TKO. Juliana Rosa winning the third round via the submission. Aspen Ladd versus Eric McMahon. That was a fight that I was really excited for seeing. I was expecting a lot for Aspen Ladd, but that fight got canceled. We have Kama Worthy defeating a very game Luis Pena by submission in the third round, 2 minutes 53 seconds in. We got Tanner Bozer defeating Philip Lenz via TKO. The surprising one, Kane Hansen submitting Jin Yufrey by submission. Third round, 2 minutes and 26 seconds in. And Yusuf Zalal winning against Jordan Griffin by decision. That's also a good fight that really people should go look out for. Would be Yusuf Zalal versus Jordan Griffin. That's a standout fight for me in the prelim card. But another one that really stands out for me would be Kay Hansen versus Jane Yufrey. Just because Jane Yufrey is coming in, I think, as the atomweight champion. She's coming in as the atomweight champion from Invicta. And so is Kay Hansen. Kay Hansen's coming in as a prospect from the Invicta Phoenix series. And so, when I look at this fight, Jane Yufrey, I'm getting a lot of Michelle Watterson vibes from her. I really am. And the fact that, because both Jin Yufrey and Michelle Watterson, they both came into the UFC as atomweight champions, and then they had to go fight their way up into strawweight, because Kay Hansen looked a lot more bigger than Jin Yufrey, and so because of that size difference, I don't know how good Jin Yufrey is, as she works her way up in the rankings in the strawweight division here, because Kay Hansen is a very young prospect, although Kay Hansen is a bubble of potential. She's only 20, she's about 20 or 21 years old. She's about 20, 21 years old. At most, she just turned 21. And so, Kay Hansen, it's interesting to see her, get her spot in because it's so, because a lot of fighters nowadays are talking about, oh man, the UFC, they give all these bad contracts. It's awful. It's terrible. But if you go on Kay Hansen's social media on Instagram, she is so ecstatic about it. It's like, hey guys, I just signed a new contract. Let's go. Dreams do come true. So, Kay Hansen being the young prospect, 20, 21 years old, I'm happy for her that she's excited, but hopefully things will turn out well for her compared to, like, a Paige Van Zandt. Because Paige Van Zandt, just like Kay Hansen, she came into the UFC in her early 20s, and now Paige Van Zandt is near her late 20s at this point. I think she's about 26 years old. She's about 26 years old, and then when she comes back to the UFC after her contract ends, she's going to be in her late 20s. And that's maybe in the UFC. So right now, I'm hoping that, so while Paige Van Zandt, while she might be leaving, another young prospect is coming in her early 20s, and hopefully things will turn out well for Kay Hansen, unlike Paige Van Zandt, who had to endure like a lot of injuries and had to go through a lot of problems trying to finish her contract that's been going on for years. Also, this coming up right now, then, Kay Hansen just won the Performance of the Night bonus. So good for her. She signed a contract. I'm pretty sure she signed a $40,000 to $50,000 contract, and because of her Performance of the Night bonus, she got herself an additional $50,000. And so, at the age of 20, 21 years old, she was able to nab about $100,000 off this one fight. So good for her. Good for Kay Hansen over there, making $100,000 at just the age of 20. So I'm happy for her, and I'm pretty sure she's happy. He's like, oh my gosh, wow, I got $100,000 from this one fight. Dreams do come true. Yeah, now she can move away from her parents' place and get her own place for now. So, I can relate. Me being a young person, I'm happy for Kay. But on top of Kay Hansen winning the Performance of the Night bonus, another fighter that won Performance of the Night would be Juliana Rosa. Fight of the Night gave to Dustin Porier and Dan Hooker. Both Porier and Dan Hooker got an additional $50,000. Because of their Fight of the Year candidacy. So both of them are really happy for that. I'm really happy for all these fighters getting their bonuses, and I can't wait to see what comes up next for all these fighters' careers. And so while those fighters are reaping the rewards, making the money, Key Hansen making $100,000 off her one fight, William Hill Better in Nevada loses $100,000 bets on UFC Fight Night. This is coming in from ReviewJournal.com. Then a William Hill Better in Nevada lost a $100,000 wager Saturday on Dan Hooker over Dustin Poirier in the main event on UFC on ESPN 12 at the Apex facility in Las Vegas. The bet would have paid $200,000 had Hooker pulled off the upset as a 2-1 underdog in their lightweight title fight. Poirier dropped the first 2 rounds of the slugfest on all 3 scorecards, but swept in the final 3 rounds en route to a victory via unanimous decision. Another William Hill Better in Nevada won $19,000, a $19,000 wager on Poirier minus 240 that paid $8,000. 2 days after Nevada sportsbooks reopened, a William Hill Better in Las Vegas won a $1 million wager on Amanda Nunes that paid $166,000 when she dominated Felicia Spencer en route to a win by unanimous decision. Okay, I'm putting this out there right now. I don't see the issue betting on Dan Hooker. It just sucked that the person lost a lot of money betting on Dan Hooker winning the fight. But I am surprised by the betting odds. I was surprised that Poirier was up minus 240. I thought it was minus 300, but apparently it was minus 240. And you know what? I wouldn't bet that much money, but I understand why somebody would bet money on Dan Hooker. It felt like it was the right time for him to go win a fight against Dustin Poirier. Considering Dustin Poirier, there are a lot of people who see Dustin Poirier kind of as a gatekeeper right now for the top 5 rankings in the lightweight division, and they don't see him really as a person who will actually ever get the belts in the lightweight division. So some might, kind of like me, I kind of thought that Dan Hooker would be able to defeat Dustin Poirier. I picked Dan Hooker defeating Poirier and sliding his way into the top 5 rankings while Poirier comes out of the top 5. That was my prediction. Now, I was wrong with the prediction, but unlike the guy, I didn't bet any money, so I'm still safe then. So yay me. And so one thing that I'm very excited for would be that potentially we could be seeing Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. That fight could be coming soon, but on top of that fight coming soon, we could see them being the coaches for the returning Ultimate Fighter show. And I love Ultimate Fighter. Ultimate Fighter pretty much, it's hard to talk about the UFC without talking about the Ultimate Fighter. There are some casual fans out there that just call UFC fighters Ultimate Fighters. It's so strange. I think I remember, I'm a pro wrestling fan also, that there was a fighter that came to the Tough Enough show. Tough Enough was like the WWE's version of like a reality show where you got these people who are trained to be professional wrestlers. And the fighter came in there and he says, "Hey, guess what? I'm an Ultimate Fighter." Now, he never participated in the actual Ultimate Fighter show, but he participated in the UFC as a former fighter. And so the announcers and fans would go call him an Ultimate Fighter. It's so strange that the word Ultimate Fighter has very weird connotations to it. But Joe Rogan claims Israel Adesanya and Paulo Costa are set to coach the Ultimate Fighter because Ultimate Fighter is making a big comeback here. And he said in his recent JRE podcast where it could be Paulo Costa and Israel Adesanya. And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, that's going to be so fun. That's going to be incredibly fun considering how vocal both Paulo Costa and Israel Adesanya are. Costa and Israel Adesanya, those guys are perfect for marketing. Israel Adesanya, he's the one fighter, he's the one current fighter right now that gets it. He really does. I feel like Israel Adesanya, in terms of personality, he gets how young, even if he's not really that young, he's like 34 years old. He's 34 years old, but yet he comes across as this young 20-year-old something guy. It just feels like it. It really is. And he's such a unique character in the fact that he goes out there, he does dances, he's into breakdancing. He's also a huge weeb into anime. He's very vocal in the Black Lives Matter protests right now in New Zealand. He's a very interesting character, Israel Adesanya is right now. And so does Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa looks like he just came out of a machine. He does. Like, if you go on Instagram and you look at Paulo Costa's Instagram pictures, he doesn't look like a normal human being. The guy is this jacked up like monster man. He looks insane. He looks like a superhero. He looks like he was developed out of like Dana White's like scientific labs that like he wants to create the perfect looking fighter. And so he created Sage Northcutt That didn't turn out well for him, and now he went in the opposite direction. Instead of going for lean, he just went 100% on the muscle mass when you're trying to create your own character, like an RPG game, and he created Paulo Costa. He is such a cartoon. Both these fighters look like cartoon characters. I'm going to be honest with you. Israel Adesanya comes across as this larger than life character, while Paulo Costa just looks like a larger than life character. So it is coming in from a recent Paulo Costa interview, to which he says, "My fight with Adesanya will be one of the biggest ones in my past few years," Costa said. "I can only speak for myself, but I'll make this pay-per-view be worth every cent. We really don't like each other. This is for sure the biggest rivalry in the middleweight history. More bigger than Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen, because Sonnen talked trash, but Anderson didn't. Anderson just let Sonnen talk. I cannot fire back, and that generates more animosity. While Adesanya vs. Costa has been made official, it's expected to be the UFC's next middleweight title bout. UFC President Dana White has been revealed that his plans to book the fight this year. Costa was supposed to receive the title opportunity back in March, but the fight was scrapped because of an injury, which led to Yoel Romero fighting Israel Adesanya. So now we're finally going to see Adesanya vs. Paulo Costa. This feud has been fuming for years now. I'm excited for it. I'm very excited to see how they talk trash to each other. I really do. I can imagine Israel Adesanya, he goes to the Ultimate Fighter house, and he's in an attempt to build camaraderie, or to build a connection with his fellow fighters. He's gonna be like, "Okay, guys, I brought the entire DVD disc set of 3 seasons of Naruto. We are gonna watch Naruto all together, and it'll be a good way for us to connect to each other, and we're gonna have fun." And it's gonna show some interview with one of the fighters being like, Israel Adesanya, he started showing us cartoons, and I don't respect Israel Adesanya, and that's why I like Paulo Costa, because Paulo Costa, he doesn't let us watch cartoons. Because the Ultimate Fighter is full of characters. It's full of strange, bizarre, sometimes sad, sometimes funny, sometimes cringeworthy characters and personalities out there. But it's a fun show, and I can't wait for it to come back. When is it coming back? When does Ultimate Fighter come back? I'm not sure when it's going to come back. I'm going to look at this right now. Dana White himself has said that he's really excited for the Ultimate Fighter coming back. Let me check it. Ultimate Fighter. So right now, I'm looking this up right now, and so far, Dana White confirms that there will be an Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter will be coming back. It's not going to be filmed at the Fight Island show, but he just says Tough is coming back soon. So what I'm thinking right now, due to the whole coronavirus pandemic, it might be coming back sometime early or middle of next year. Probability depends on what happens with the coronavirus issue, because right now you can't have 16 fighters or 12 fighters come together under one roof. There's just too much risk involved in that, and I don't think Dana White will take the risk of having these 12, 15 fighters who are not even officially signed with the UFC to possibly go to the house together and someone gets sick. That doesn't sound right. That won't look good at all for the UFC, and it could end in a disaster. So when do I expect this matchup to happen? I expect Adesanya versus Paulo Costa coming up end of next year, with the Ultimate Fighter happening early or mid next year. That's what I expect. And so you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back right after the short break here with something a little bit more fun. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. So, I like to end my podcast here with something a little bit more fun, or something quirky or weird. And so, I found a very interesting article here, and it's coming in from SureDog.com forums, in that it's asking, what are your personal pet peeves when watching UFC cards? There are some aspects about the UFC card that me and my brother constantly make fun of, and it's that one huge pet peeve that kind of bothers the heck out of me is Bruce Buffer, when he has to announce something that he's obviously not into, and it's very cringy. I think one thing he said, This fight is sponsored by Tap Out. Be the fighter in you. This fight is sponsored by Dragon Ball Fighters. Be the Saiyan in you. It's something very cringy about Bruce Buffer promoting brands that obviously he doesn't care about, or he's reading from like a note card he wrote. Something about that really bothers me. And so in this forum here, I found other pet peeves that bother the heck out of me. Another one is fighters whose nicknames are the Pitbull. I hate that. There's nothing more unoriginal and more gatekeepy than somebody called the Pitbull or the Assassin or the Warrior. Or if there's somebody out there with a really bad nickname like Twinkle Toes, Frank, like Twinkle Toes Trigg, that's really bad. So here are some examples. Here's some things that other people have said. Examples include don't like the judges' scorecards. Should have finished the fight. Okay. I am bothered by that. Whenever Dana White says that, he's always a critic of saying the judges, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, they don't know what they're doing. But he's gonna be like, I'm telling you, man, if you really wanted to win the fight, you should have never went to the judges' scorecards. And I don't get that because Khabib Nurmagomedov a majority of his fights end via the judges' scorecards. Like, there's a lot of great fights that end via judges' scorecards. Like Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner, which was something that Dana White always said is his favorite fight of all time. Like Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Weili Zhang, that ended up with judges' scorecards, and that was a great fight. And it's so like disparaging to the fighters, saying, "Oh, you didn't finish the fight. It probably showed you didn't want it enough." Like, what about you stop blaming the fighters for not ending the fight? Stop blaming fighters who don't end up winning through the judges' scorecards. That's nice, because if a champion were to win by the judges' scorecard, you'd be like, that guy fought like a champion. Yeah, but if you were to knock out the person in his championship fight, he'd be like, yeah, he fought like a true champion there. So what does it mean to fight like a true champion? Are you fighting like a true champion if you win by decision, or are you fighting like a true champion if you win by, like, judges' scorecards? It's super inconsistent, and I just never understood that. I never really did. Another fight peeve here is Face the Pain. Me and my brother would watch UFC all the time, and whenever my dad would come in, he would always start laughing about Face the Pain. He just hated that song. It's the most cringe-worthy song ever. Another pet peeve of mine was when UFC Unleashed was presented on Spike TV. And the opening video would be a highlight reel of fighters doing these like hard knockdowns on people. And my dad would come in, and he would laugh at it. And I'd ask him, "Hey, Dad, what are you laughing at? This is really cool." Like you see Brock Lesnar doing like a cool like right hook on like Frank Mir or some stuff like that. Someone getting a leg kick on, and he's laughing because he's like, "You know what's funny? Because in this video, why are the fighters red? Why are they not red? Why are they radioactive?" Because if you look back at the old UFC Unleashed videos, you see Brock Lesnar. He would punch Frank Mir, and then Frank Mir would turn into a radioactive like skeleton man for a brief second, and then the earth would shake, and it was super like, oh my gosh, it was like so lame. While you hear Face the Pain in the background. Another one here is saying, another thing people said here would be, pet peeve would be, how Joe Rogan would be screaming, "Oh, he's rocked," anytime someone lands a jab. You know what? Jabs can knock people down. People get knocked. You know, people get rocked for any punch, for any hit. So that makes sense. Fighters who rock their opponents and immediately shoot for a takedown. I'd have to say that is something that does happen a lot in the UFC and a lot of fighters. Like, once I know what they're trying to go for, they go for the knockdown and then they go for a ground and pound. But if they don't have the wrestling pedigree for that and they're doing the ground and pound stuff, it just looks really bad. It just really doesn't. When commentators blank their pants following an average fighter beating a legendary fighter 10 years past their prime. Yes, Damian Maia is the biggest victim of that, really. Gilbert Burns versus Damian Maia. Gilbert Burns is obviously going to win that. And then for Anderson Silva versus Israel Adesanya, like Anderson Silva is pretty much washed up. He pretty much is. My friend's dad did this to us one time, where we were watching Anderson Silva versus Daniel Cormier. And then when Cormier defeated Anderson Silva, he's like, "Wow, he defeated Anderson Silva, man. That guy knocked out Vitor Belfort with one kick one time." And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he did in the past. All that matters is the present. And I think they overhype fighters who defeat legends. Like, Gilbert Burns, the guy's a great fighter, but he did not need it to defeat Damian Maia to prove that he's a great fighter. Another thing is the robbery that has to happen in every other card. Yes, I don't like the fact that it's accepted that some fighters are going to be robbed in their fight card. The judges' scorecards need to be changed more. I really believe so. Not everything should be 10-9 or 10-8. What's the point of 1 through 7 then? I don't get it. C-list celebrities cage side because they couldn't afford Laker tickets. Yes, you would see the always in sunny Philadelphia guys are there, or somebody or a former football player who currently works at ESPN would show up, and then Goldberg would be like, "Oh wow, look, it's like Michael Strahan." Yeah, it's ridiculous. No ring boys for a women's mixed martial arts fights. I agree. There should be ring boys for a women's mixed martial arts fight. If we can have ring girls, we should have ring boys. Just to have it both ways for equality, okay? Some garbage women's MMA fights being bumped up and taking the spot of much more established deserving fighters because WME wants to be more progressive. I wouldn't say that. There are a lot of good, legitimate women's mixed martial arts fights. My problem, though, is when you have unranked fighters fighting in the main card. I'm a firm believer that every fight in the main card should be a ranked fight. And I don't like it when you have an unranked fighter. You have two unranked fighters fighting the main card while a higher ranked fighter is going to compete in the prelims. That happened with Anthony Pettis versus Don Cerrone. They're both in the middle of the pack in their divisions, but yet they got bumped down to the main event of the prelims. But yet there's another fight that was unranked that ended up in the same card that was in the main card, or involved two fighters that were lower down in the rankings. I just don't. I guess kind of enjoy that there. Bad judges who have no knowledge of MMA when someone on commentary is biased and ignoring the other fighter's success. That happens. That's not just in mixed martial arts, but it happens in college all the time. If a low-ranked team defeats a high-ranked, like if it happens a lot in football, which is why I don't like college football and college basketball. It's when you have a low-ranked team in basketball or football upset a high-ranked team. They're not going to say, "Oh, the low-ranked team, they played great." All they said was, "Oh, the high-ranked team, they played bad." It's ridiculous. Early stoppages. Yes, early stoppages. I am fine with the referee stopping a fight if it gets too gruesome, but when it looks like the other fighter is able to fight back and then just stops, I believe that fighters should... It's kind of like the Dominic Cruz situation. Every fighter should be given the opportunity to fight back, and when it looks like they're actually fighting back, or they look like that they are capable of fighting yet another round, then there shouldn't be a stoppage there. For Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje, that was a right stoppage. For Dominic Cruz versus Henry Cejudo, I don't agree so. Trashy low-level fighters being the prelims, that's a difficult. So the UFC is meant to be this organization that has the best fighters in the world, but then we have like a lot of inexperienced fighters just jump in there, or journeyman fighters that shouldn't belong, or you obviously can tell are not going to move up anywhere in the rankings. So there are some fights in some MMA cards where you're thinking, wow, this fight doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Like, to be honest with you, Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall, that fight doesn't matter. There's honestly no implications in the grand scheme of things for either of those fighters if either of them were to win the fight. None. It's good for them to get paid. I'm not against that. I'm happy Mike Perry and Mickey Gall both got paid money. But in terms of the rankings, they don't really matter very well because you don't expect either of those two fighters to move up in the rankings anytime soon. Refs saying do something or action multiple times when the fighters are stalled out in a position. Just break them up immediately or say it one time only when they break it up. I agree with that. You give one warning. You give a warning, and if they're not doing anything, then you break it up. But you shouldn't say, "I'm giving you a warning," then give another warning, then another warning, because you're just wasting time right there. Stalling, there's a lot of stalling. If there's no change of position, make them resume the fight. I agree with that. Commentators obviously favoring a fighter. I don't think there's not much favoritism happening. I think with Dominic Cruz and Daniel Cormier, it happens a lot. The commentary, which is why I always watch fights with the volume turned off. A lot of people are mentioning how bad the commentary is. The commentary is very cringy. I cannot. It's hard not to listen to. It's hard not to listen to Joe Rogan and listen to his Jerry podcast and poke jokes at the guy. It's hard, especially when like he goes off on a tangent and starts like kind of laughing at some stuff happening in the ring or in the octagon. The fact that the cards last 7 hours is ridiculous. Yes. If cards starts at 4 o'clock and ends at 9 o'clock. Well, that's how you kind of pick and choose which cards you want to watch. You don't have to watch every card. You don't have to. There are a lot of fights in the UFC and Invicta that don't really matter, and so that's why you pay attention to the main card. It happens with me with some prelims. Unless there's a fight that I'm interested in the prelims, then I would watch it. And if I do, here's the thing: there are some really fun fights you can watch in the prelims. They're not going to matter that much in the grand scheme of things, but there are some fun fights in the prelims that if you are like an aficionado of like mixed martial arts, you like to watch it. Being in the US, I'm sure others have it worse, but I hate the fact that they start the card so late. Why not start the main card at 8 p.m.? Eastern time or Western time? The main event ends up being at 1 a.m. That's for Eastern time. I don't know how to handle that because these events happen in the West Coast. And so times right there are just very off. The pacing, some cards drag on so long when it comes to not really needed to. Keep the fights rolling. You can't force a fighter to not fight their slow style. You can't force wrestlers to not wrestle. It does get to a drag. Okay, from an entertainment standpoint, there are like some wrestlers like Khabib Nurmagomedov who you can watch and be like, oh my gosh, this is like so fun, this is so good, and then you can watch there are some wrestlers. I really can't name any of them right now because if I do name them right now, like they're going to give me like really bad press. But and even from like the Greg Jackson camp, that's hard for me to watch any of those fighters. Yeah, some fights do end up being a total drag, and you kind of want it to end, sadly enough, but that's just the reality of sports. And so there's Saturday night's fight card made me realize how much better the cards are without advertising clogging up the thing. Yeah, Saturday fight cards, I agree with that. Watching a UFC Fight Night card is so much more chill and more relaxing than watching a pay-per-view. Because there are moments and times where we're gonna have a commercial break with ads, and then we're gonna cut to a fighter doing a press conference, like a post-fight interview, and then another commercial, then them walking to the octagon, then another commercial. It gets ridiculous. It really does. My girlfriend asking me the same questions every fight. My friends do that. My friends Emily do that. Then don't watch mixed martial arts with them. Bruce Buffer pronouncing non-American names and cities wrong. The high-pitched fair screech people do for the undercard fighters because they don't know them. Is that something the Rebel yell? No wonder the South lost the words. I agree. I'm telling you right now, people who bought tickets to watch an MMA event, I can guarantee you, they know about maybe 8 fighters out of like the 20 fighters that you are watching that card. It gets really cringy because at one point they look bored, but when they know the camera's on them, they're like, yeah! Time of my life! Woo! You can't be that amped and that excited consistently. You can't. I've been to boxing shows and a lot of sports events. No crowd is ever consistently that excited. Have you been to a basketball game? You think the third quarter is the most boring quarter ever because no one cares what happens in the third quarter unless you're a Warriors fan. But there are some moments in some sports events that are really boring that do become kind of a drag, and it happens also in mixed martial arts. It does happen. Now there's a lot more pet peeves here that I would like to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it on the next episode here. That brings us to the end of today's episode. All I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to this show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.